Hey guys, today I'm going to be speedrunning Bit Dungeon 2, which is an indie game I found on Steam. And if you're not familiar with this game, it's basically a cross between the original Legend of Zelda and Diablo. So basically, you spend the game running around this overworld map. It has 6 dungeons to find and tons of loot to collect. So I decided to speedrun this game because I've been interested in speedrunning for a long time, and I thought this would be a good, manageable challenge. The game isn't too long, and you basically spend the entire time running balls to the wall. So why don't we get to it? You'll notice as I'm starting the game, basically what I do is I restart the game until I get a good spawn point. Basically, there are 4 spawn points in the overworld map, and there are 2 that I like. One is in Grief Forest, and the other is in Endless War. I picked these because I like to start out running and hitting the Tomb of Souls first. That's the first dungeon that I find. And basically, when I was mapping out the overworld and how I wanted to run it, that was the optimum starting point. Just the fewest number of tiles that I had to run through. So, as I started speedrunning this game, I found that there's this risk-reward decision that you have to make constantly, which is you want great gear in this game, but finding gear takes time. And the more time you spend basically rolling the dice, trying to find good gear, the slower your run is going to be. Yet, if you find awesome gear, the faster your run is going to be. So, what I decided to do at the beginning of the game is I picked a route that goes through a lot of areas that have loot, and specifically there are these cracks that you find in the trees and in the ice walls and just all over the map. And these are secret rooms that have a really good rare item in them. So usually, I'll spend about a minute running through these areas and see if I can find some loot that gets me excited and makes me think that this run's going to be really fast. And if not, I just restart the game and keep going. So this game has 9 gear slots, and when I start the game, I immediately go to the store and pick up a sword and shield. Right now, I just picked up a helmet and boots, and I'm going to end up filling 8 of those 9 slots. The last slot is for runes, and those cost coins, and it's just not worth it on the route that I'm on. Basically, you have to travel 2 screens, and you only get 2 or 4 decks if you want to pick up a rune. Just grabbed a ring right there. Here, I pass on a giant sword, and basically that's because I don't like two-handed weapons in this game. Two-handed weapons are slow, and they end up using a lot of stamina. And as you see right now, I have a dagger and a shield, and that takes up 2 slots. And if I grab a two-handed weapon, then I only have 1 slot. And usually what happens in these runs is you end up sad that you can't pick up a fancy shield or a fancy one-handed weapon. Okay, here's our first secret room. I grab a helmet that gives me some extra armor. Armor just does base damage reduction, and it has plus 16 HP, which is pretty high. Here I find another secret room, and it's got a pretty nice shield in it. It's going to give me high armor and high block. Just to explain the stat system in this game a bit, there are 5 primary stats, and every weapon in the game does damage based on 1 or 2 of these stats. So you'll notice that I mostly stick to strength and dex weapons. These are the best offensive stats, in my opinion. There's 2 stats that we basically ignore, and those are spirit and intelligence. These are good for magic users, but we don't want to use magic because the damage per second is pretty low. And the final stat is constitution, which is also known as HP. This affects how much health and stamina you have. And if you look in the lower left corner, the red is health and the purple is stamina. I'll get into why later, but I'm mainly trying to stack dex and HP when I'm looking at gear. Besides the primary stats, there are secondary stats, and usually these are either offensive or defensive stats. So the defensive stats are things like parry and dodge, and these are some percentage chance to not take any damage from a hit. The offensive stats are things like crit and cleave, and these are some percent chance to do extra damage with your hit. And some of these hits, the multipliers can be pretty high. You'll see like crit is 3 times your base damage, cleave is 2 times your base damage. You'll see I'm using my skill to do surprise damage, which is 4 times base damage. Anyway, all the different kinds of hits can be kind of overwhelming at first, but once you realize they all work pretty much the same way, the game gets a lot simpler. Okay, we got our first boss here, and I can tell I'm doing a good job at this point because it only takes me 1 cycle to beat him. Like, I don't have to wait for my stamina to refill. And normally when I'm playing through, it'll take me 2 or 3 times, and if it takes that long, you'll end up seeing the boss's magic attack, and he becomes invulnerable for a while during this magic attack, so it can really add a lot of seconds to your run. Man, this is going by fast. So that item I just picked up had +5 crit on it, and crit is actually my favorite secondary stat. The reason being, crit hits do 3 times base damage, so if you do the math, every point of crit that you gain actually increases your average damage per hit by 2%. So that item that I just picked up that gave me +5 crit is actually going to increase my average damage per hit by 10%. And that can be pretty significant, especially once we start getting our base damage over 100. Another important thing about crit is that it takes priority over lesser damage stats. So this doesn't matter too much in the early game, but say in the end game you have 50% cleave and 50% crit. What ends up happening is you end up doing crit damage 50% of the time and cleave damage 25% of the time. And you'll just have to trust me on the math on that one, but it means that crit is great. So, as I was saying earlier, Dex is my favorite primary stat in this game, and the reason it's my favorite is because for every 5 points of Dex, you get a free point of crit. And that's a little nicer than the bonus you get from Strength. With Strength, you get, for every 5 points of Strength, you get an extra point of Cleave. But the way the math works out is every point of crit gives you an extra 2% of damage, and extra cleave only gives you 1% extra damage. So basically, Dex is twice as good as Strength in this game. Not to say that Strength is bad. In fact, you'll notice I'm collecting a lot of gear with Strength on it, and that's because there are a couple weapons in this game, like daggers and spears and short swords, that they can roll their primary stats as both Dex and Strength. So to calculate their base damage, you basically add Strength and Dex together. You see these stats on a lot of items, so if you have a weapon that is based on both Strength and Dex, you're going to end up finding a lot more loot that ends up upgrading your character. So this is a good thing, especially in a speedrun where we can't afford to be too picky about the items that we pick up. Just to talk about the combat system in this game a bit, you may think it looks pretty boring because the way I'm playing is basically just mashing buttons. It's because if you just walk into enemies, it will do some amount of damage that doesn't cost you any stamina. If you mash your attack button, you'll do a fast attack that uses a bit of stamina. And if you hold down the attack button, you do a special attack. This special attack slows you down though, so I end up not using it very much. And that special attack depends on what weapon you're using. My dagger lets me do a stealthy attack, so it's not that helpful. I just picked up a weapon upgrade. It had a high int roll on it, which is not useful to me, but it does do a lot more damage, so overall it was a good pickup. So there are 6 stats caves on the overworld, and I ended up visiting all of them in this route. That's because usually stats caves are pretty close to either the entrance or exits of the dungeons, and overall I'm getting plus 30 dex, which is higher than most items can roll, and it doesn't take up an item slot, so it ends up being a pretty efficient way of increasing your damage. So you'll notice at this point in the run, I'm starting to have some problems with my stamina. Basically, when your stamina runs out, you can't tap the attack button anymore, which is how I've been dealing damage most of this run. So it really slows me down. I have to basically run away from enemies and let my stamina bar recharge before I can get back to doing damage. So I'm starting to get a little nervous about this. You'll also notice that I'm using my special attack a little bit more. My special attack, I hold down A, and since I have a shield, it will stun all the enemies around me. This is really nice for keeping the enemies in place and also preventing them from doing any damage to me. Here I find a really nice cape. It's got plus 16 strength. My weapon still doesn't have strength damage on it, but I'm hoping that I'll find one with strength and dex later on. And it also gives me plus 10 chop, which is another offensive secondary stat, so that's a chance to do double damage, I think. Just to talk about the healing in this game a bit, the purple enemies that you see occasionally are enemies that have a chance, it's about a 25% chance to drop a health potion. And these enemies pop up anytime you go to a room that you've already cleared. So if you backtrack, which a lot of these dungeons you have to backtrack. For example, if you find a key and you need to go back to wherever you use the key. If you're lucky, like I am in this run, you end up getting enough health potions just from backtracking and finding these enemies. But if you're less lucky, or you are just playing dangerously and losing lots of health, you end up spending a lot of time backtracking, just going back to rooms, or maybe going back and forth between rooms and kind of farming these health-dropping enemies. And if you're unlucky, you end up losing a lot of time doing this because there's a random chance for them to spawn. I think 1 to 4 can spawn in any room. So that's random, and whether they drop health potions or not is random as well. So each dungeon also has these environment things. Right here it looks like they're egg sacs, and those have a chance to drop items or health potions. Here I was hoping they would have health potions, but you'll see my health is almost out, and I nearly died there because I couldn't find any health potions. Even in this room, there are 8 of these egg sacs, and I can't find any health potions when I really need them. Luckily, I found a really great weapon here. I've been hoping for a weapon with both strength and dex, and this happens to be one that also has extra HP and extra run speed. Of course, I'm flipping out a bit in this run right now because my health is so low, one hit will kill me, and I just found all this great gear. Luckily, I heal up at this campsite, and that problem is fixed. So, at this point, you may be thinking, what run speed? We haven't even talked about run speed yet. Isn't that the most important stat for speedrunning? And it may be, but what I've found in my runs is that actually the most important thing for getting through this game quickly is just being able to slaughter enemies and just like run through them and cut through them like a knife. And the faster you're able to kill enemies and bosses, the faster your run goes. If you have high run speed, but you have low HP, for example, you're going to end up spending a lot of time just sitting there waiting for your stamina to refill. And that is a waste of time. That being said, at this point in the game, my damage is pretty good, and since I found that HP item in the last dungeon, my constitution is under control, and adding a little run speed on top of that is just, all in all, a great thing. Actually, there is an item in this game that gives you a really high run speed boost, and it'll give you either plus 50 or plus 60 run speed. And it is one of the items that you can find in the secret caves that are hidden in the overworld. So if you want to have an amazing run and you don't mind grinding the RNG a little bit, or a lot, you should definitely hold out for that item. It's a rare crown, I believe. Here you'll notice that I just grabbed a ring without even looking at it. The reason I grabbed that is because it is a purple item, so I know it's going to be good, and I just wanted it. Whatever my ring was, it wasn't doing too much for me, so I just decided to go ahead and upgrade. Funnily enough, I just triggered buff there, which I believe... Yeah, I have 10% buff, so that's a 10% chance when you take damage to boost your armor and magic resist to 75, which ends up being a lot of damage mitigation. And if you're facing a boss and getting hit a whole bunch, then that ends up proccing a whole lot. So that's a pretty nice defensive skill to have. You'll notice that I went through that boss pretty quickly. I actually only had to refill my stamina once, and I barely needed to refill it as it was. So I know that that plus 19 HP item I got really helped out my run. Otherwise, I'd be just waiting for stamina to refill, and that would be boring. Here I used a campsite, even though I didn't really need to. The campsites heal you up to full health, which is nice. I didn't need it this time. They also save your progress, so if you end up dying in a dungeon, you'll respawn at the last campsite you were at. So it doesn't take that much more time to save at a campsite, and if you die and you are at a nearby campsite, it usually only takes you about a minute to get back into the action. Here I get screwed by the RNG a little bit. When you enter the room and you spawn on top of an enemy, sometimes you can get kicked out of the room. So that sucked. And I almost lost my weapon there, too. And it was in a room that I didn't even have to kill all the enemies. I was just really mad at the enemies at that point, so I wanted them to die. But normally, these rooms are kind of split into rooms where you need to kill everyone to open the doors, and rooms where all the doors are open and you can just rush through them. In fact, this dungeon layout is the most open dungeon layout. Like, it has the most rooms that you can run through. So it's nice that I found that run speed item just now, because that makes this layout that much faster. By the way, the dungeon layouts in this game are random, as in there are only 7 layouts, but it's random which one corresponds to which dungeon you find. So the more you run this, you just get used to the layouts, and it doesn't make that big of a difference. You'll notice that these enemies are proccing regen, and that's something that you can also find on items. Regen is a chance to heal up for damage instead of taking damage. By the way, this puzzle with the sliding blocks is a really easy puzzle. The block that you need to move is always the one that is opposite from the door you're coming from. You can also cheat that puzzle a little bit. You can push a block so that it sits on two buttons at once. That is kind of hard to pull off, so I don't even attempt it. But if you want to shave some seconds, you can try that. This boss, like most bosses, has a magic attack that leaves him invulnerable for a little while, so I just play it safe and let him do that while I wait around. This is a pretty nice helm. I'm pretty excited about getting some extra run speed at this point. I really like... Oh, and here's another run speed item. I really like run speed at this point. I think that item was a bit of a downgrade, but I just want to try and see what happens when I am stacking run speed. And I'm going a lot faster now, and I know I have a lot of running coming up, so I'm pretty psyched about having all this run speed. By the way, these stat caves, I'm taking dex every time. If I am playing more conservatively, sometimes I'll take some constitution. But what I found is that usually you find items with HP that have really high HP rolls. Like, it's not that uncommon to find HP items that'll give you plus 15 or 25 or 30 HP. So I try to rely on items to get high constitution, and I just go ahead and stack dex from the stat caves. And basically my goal, by the time I get to the end boss, I kind of want to have 100 dex and 100 constitution. And I just leave those as my goals. If I have less than either of those, I usually have problems. Like, if I have low dex, it ends up taking a long time to do the amount of damage I want, and I won't have enough crit to multiply that damage. And if I have low constitution, I just end up wasting a lot of time waiting for my stamina bar to refill. Here, I get a little thrown off by all these bad items, and I actually make a routing mistake here. This is a room that you don't have to go in yet, so I have to backtrack a little bit there, and that's fine. But yeah, one of the big skills in running this game is being able to look at gear quickly and decide whether or not it's worth picking up. The main ways I do that is I think about the color of the item. You know, in the beginning of the game, it's okay to pick up some gray items. Those are kind of your base items, and those are better than nothing, but eventually you want to upgrade to something nicer. And I kind of keep a mental list of what items I found that are really good. So, for example, if I find an item that is really working for my build, I want to make sure not to ever look at that item again. Like, I'm not going to waste my time looking at helmets from now on. By the way, those giant purple enemies always drop a health potion, so they're nice, except they also take a little longer to kill, and they're a little bit more dangerous. So again, it's another risk-reward calculation that you have to do. I'm getting pretty lucky with the health potions at this point. The Black Church, I usually take a lot of damage in this dungeon just because it's one of the final dungeons on my route. But I'm getting pretty lucky here, and this is nice. So right at the start of the bosses, I always try to do my shield stun attack on the boss just to get some damage before you're really supposed to be allowed to damage the boss. It doesn't make that big of a difference, it's just one hit. But yeah, anyway, I totally slaughtered that boss, so I'm feeling really strong at this point. And that's everything that happens in the overworld, so we're going to go to the dark world now. This part of my route I'm not super satisfied with. You have to travel across a lot of screens to get to the dark world. I have one idea for fixing that, but it's really risky. One thing you could do is you could save at a campsite that is just 2 screens away from the Dark World entrance, and then you could die on purpose and respawn at the campsite. But that seems like a really dangerous strategy, and it means that if you die in the game, you're just completely dead, which is fine when you are playing a super optimized speedrun and you expect to not die, but it's not very fun to rely on that, because then you die and your game is just completely over. The Dark World has a bunch of these stat caves, and it actually has 6 caves overall, but I took the time to calculate how much time it would take to visit all of these stat caves, and what I ended up doing, my strategy here is to visit 2 of the caves, which only add about 8 seconds each to my run, and I avoid the other caves because they will take 12 to 16 seconds each to collect the stats. So this is kind of a compromise that I make. And I also like the feeling that, you know, I visit these 2 stat caves and it adds 16 seconds or whatever, and I just know that those 16 seconds are always there if I need it. Like, if I need to take a big risk and shave off 16 seconds, like if I'm running behind on my time, then those caves are always there for me. When you're playing through the game normally, the Dark World is pretty exciting because these enemies are not that tough, and they end up dropping some cool items. Like, if you have any empty item slots at this point, usually the items you find here are pretty high level. Of course, they're pretty annoying to speedrun because they all have high phase, which is a chance for them to teleport slightly away from where they are. So the best strategy here is just to run around them. That's generally the best strategy for any enemies in the game, but it's especially true in the Dark World where you're just trying to get through as quickly as possible. The Dark World is especially dangerous because there's no campsite outside of this dungeon, so if you die, you end up respawning at whatever the last campsite you visited in the overworld. And there's one that's only 2 screens away, as I said, but if you don't save there, you know, it just adds up. It adds a lot of time, and you have to go through the entire Dark World to get back to this dungeon. So you really don't want to die in here. That can really ruin your run. For that reason, it's good to be conservative and spend some time backtracking and farming health potions when you need them. I get lucky here, so I don't have to do that too much. So I don't have much to say about this dungeon. It kind of works just like all the other dungeons work, and my strategy for going through these is pretty much the same. Like, since I've played these enough times to have them memorized, I am just making sure I don't make any layout mistakes, that I go, you know, on the quickest path through the fewest screens as possible. I'm also trying to think about what room I'm going to see next, because you can start running before you even see your character, and that's going to end up saving, you know, little fractions of seconds. And like this puzzle, anytime I see this, I always make a mental note to myself that I will be right back to this room. Yeah, I just tell myself stupid stuff like that to whatever helps you remember what's coming next. So since it's coming up, I might as well talk a little bit about the final boss fight. You'll notice up until now, I've just been slaying the bosses of every single dungeon like it's no thing. I don't have to strategize too much. The final boss is significantly harder than all the other bosses in the game. Well, this is not the final boss, this is a boss, and this guy actually has an attack that's dangerous, so I'm gonna run away from that. Oh man, I have no time to talk about the final boss. Here is an amazing weapon I found. That plus 43 HP is pretty huge, and that's really important right now because that means my stamina is going to last that much longer. And the final boss can take a lot of cycles of stamina, so being able to stack that is great. This is also not the final boss. This is another guy I can just cut through like butter. Here I pull up my stat screen. Everything's looking pretty good. I got my dex and my constitution to 100. And yeah, this is the final boss. You have to be really careful here, and the strategy is the same. You just run up and punch her as quickly as possible, and then run away when your stamina is low. If you get hit and you have no stamina, then you can't defend like you usually do. Defense actually cuts into your stamina, so that's another reason why it's important to keep your stamina pretty high. I usually, when my stamina drops to like the 20% level, if I am playing it safe, I will run away at that point. And if you're running away, you can usually avoid her magic projectiles. Okay, I might have been able to kill her there if I had just stuck to it, but I'm playing it safe here because I know on this 5th cycle I can kill her, and that's it. And that's the run. So, just to explain how dangerous this boss is, normally, if you're a new player or if you suck, it's not recommended that you fight this boss on your first playthrough. Usually, what you do is you just run through the exit door, which is open, and you hope that on your second playthrough, you will be strong enough to beat the boss. And actually, this boss is kind of unfair, because most of the game, you have an extra life, and when you fight this boss, the extra life disappears. And if you die at this boss, you don't respawn at the campsite. You completely die, and you start over from level 1. So I've ended many runs just dying at this final boss, and there's just nothing you can do. You just lost all that time, and you got nothing for it. So the safe thing to do is take whatever item you found in that red chest and go play through the game again, and then hope on your second playthrough you can actually beat the final boss. So on the first playthrough where I actually beat this boss, I had much higher stats. My crit was around 35%, and my level was around 40. I think 23 is one of the lowest levels that I've beaten the game at. Most of the other videos I've seen on YouTube of people playing this game are people who have played many playthroughs, and their levels are, you know, up in the 125 range, and of course they slaughter whatever bosses they fight. But I think this game is more fun when you try it low level, and I thought this was a really fun game to speedrun. Anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching and listening. If you're interested in speedrunning this game, now's actually a great time to get into it. There's a 2.0 patch in beta right now, and it has a new overworld map, so there's new routing to do, and I would love some competition. I don't know how much more I'll be speedrunning this game. I know that a sub 25 time is possible, but yeah, some friendly competition would be great. If you have any questions about, you know, how the game works or how this run works, feel free to leave some comments or message me, and I will try to help you out. Anyway, thanks, and take care.